Good evening and welcome to this tutorial on creating, editing and converting transparent WebM graphics for your live streams and online media. In this tutorial I will be showing you how to create a simple, elegant follower pop-up notification and how to convert this over to the WebM format, which is suitable for using in OBS Expert and other streaming software. It does support transparency and creates tiny file sizes, which are what we're always looking for while retaining quality. As part of this tutorial, I will be using Adobe After Effects for creating the actual animation. You can use any software you'd like, free or paid, providing it can render out into the MOV format, as we will need to use some kind of intermediary format in most cases before converting to WebM for final use. We will be using ffmpeg for converting for free to the WebM format, and also looking at using Adobe Media Encoder, which is a much more fully featured suite, but does cost. I do believe the Adobe suite is fully worth the price, but we will also be, of course, covering free options just in case. So without further ado, I'll show you a very quick demonstration of what we're looking to create today, and then we'll get straight into the tutorial. The first thing we're going to want to do is create the animated overlay, the parts that display on stream that pop up with transparency. And to do that, we're going to start in Adobe After Effects. As previously mentioned, you can use any software you'd like to do this, providing it can render out an MOV, but I do like Adobe After Effects, Photoshop, things like that for creating these, as the options you have, the things you can do, more are down to your imagination than a software limitation. So to start with this, the first thing I'm going to want to do is just make sure I am in a new project. So click File and New Project up here. Puts me in a brand new workspace and allow me to start from scratch. This is a new file, and I tend to keep multiple compositions for multiple overlays within the same single project so that I can use a similar thing and just duplicates with different changes, so everything keeps a nice theme. So first thing I'm going to want to do is double click over here in the work area and find some files. So I'm going to put my logo in there, and I'm going to create a new composition. Now the composition, I'm going to make it 1920 by 1080. This is standard 69 aspect ratio, which most people stream at. If you do stream at 1440p or some other resolution, it is best to make this match the resolution you're streaming at. I'm going to make it 30 frames per second and leave it with a duration of 15 seconds. The duration isn't overly important. Most of mine come to 7 or 8 seconds long in total, but the 15 seconds work area gives us enough time to be able to edit things, add fades, things like that, and we'll leave the background black. The first thing you'll want to know with doing this kind of thing and making transparency is this little option down here. These little squares, when you click that, it actually shows you what areas will be transparent. Anything with this kind of grid is transparent and see-through. The black background gives you a nice background to work on, but this is what will be rendered as transparency. This is the full 1080p of what you'll stream, so you'd be looking to make your overlay in whatever location you had it. You could make the entire composition match just the specs of the design you're looking to go to, and then place that how you wish. I like to do it with the full screen overlay, as it means all the elements are perfectly lined up the same every time. I'm not relying on my streaming software to line the elements up. So I'm going to drag the logo down in here, and we are going to do this quite quickly. I'm going to bring the scale down. To pop this up, you just press S on your keyboard, and then we're going to press P, and we're going to move the position up to the top. I'm going to go back to scale. So 64 looks about right for the size. So I'm actually going to set this to 0 at the start of the composition. Click the little stopwatch here. This will set a keyframe. This is for making animation. I'm just going to go across to 1 second in the clip. So that's 30 frames, 29 frames, 30 frames is a second. And we're going to go make that above 64. We're going to make that to about 79. In fact, let's even it up. We'll make that to 80, and that stays within the composition still. We see throughout the entire animation that doesn't go out of the comp, and then a few frames forward here, and we'll set this to the 64. That looked good first. So if I press N just to shorten the render area and play this through, you'll see that kind of does a bounce. A little bit slow. I'm just going to move these two keyframes over, and we'll try again. Possibly make that a little bit bigger. And we'll move it down so it's still within the work area. Go back to your scale options, and let's see what that looks like. Press spacebar to preview, or numpad 0 if you have a full-size keyboard. And we'll see that has a nice little bounce effect. What we want to do now is select all of these frames, press F9 on your keyboard, and that will change them to these almost hourglass shapes. This is called Easy Ease. What this allows you to do is lets it go just over and just under what you're allowing, and adds a speed. If I actually look at the graph editor and then change it to the speed graph, we'll see this goes up, down and back. It kind of wobbles. So we'll go back, and then we play this. We'll see we get a nice little spring effect there that pops up, comes back down, nice and simple. So we'll go across to here so we can see its final size. And we're going to click off all of our layers, click the little rectangle up here, and we just want to make a little rectangle. Now we want to fill this with a color. I'm going to select one of the darker blues from within here, and then for the stroke, I'm going to give it a black stroke of 10 pixels, keep everything nice and even. And we know that's there. Click up here or press V on our keyboards to bring up our move tool, and we want to move that until it's about even with the display. So we'll make it a little bit smaller so that it's not too large. And there we go, we have the little bar. On this shape player, I'll go to Effect, Transition, and Linear Wipe. We'll set this to -90 as we want it to animate the other way. Set this all the way to 100 at the start, and hit the little stopwatch again to set a keyframe that essentially remembers the value, and it will change to the other value you set to further along the line. And we want this to be, let's start with the same timing as this, and we'll work from there. So if I now do this, we get this where that bar comes on. So that timing can be adjusted. We can move this about, and if we actually select these keyframes here, press U on your keyboard to bring up all keyframes within a selected layer. Press F9. Let's see what they look like with an Easy Ease effect on now. I think that takes away a bit from the effect, so I'll undo that, Control Z as you would with any application, and you get that there. What you would do for your text on here, this would be added directly within OBS or using your bot. Don't add any text that's specific to a username within your editing software. That's something that changes depending on the person following, the person hosting, the person subscribing. So always make sure that you leave a space for it, but don't include it initially. And the final thing I want to do is I'm just going to stick some text in here which says new follower. So I'm going to go text. We'll make it the Slimlines font, and we'll type in new follower. Let's turn on our black background, click back to our move tool, and now you'll see if I hold shift while moving, I can move. If I hold shift, it keeps things on an axis. So let's make that a bit smaller, and then let's move that across to there. So we have this. It's very, very, very simple. And what I'm going to do is I want the scale of the new follower to directly do what the scale of the logo is actually doing. So I'm going to go scale. I'm going to take this little pick whip, as it's called, and move it over to match the scale of there. And you'll see that actually comes in from the side. So I'm just going to move the anchor point until this little circle here is directly in the middle, because that's the point I want it to originate from. To get up your anchor point, that's A on your keyboard. And now if we move this back to the center of there, we get the new follower text coming up. One thing I do like to do, the way that I initially did this, is I actually designed all of these elements in Photoshop. You can do a lot of what you can do in Photoshop in After Effects and in other software, but I find Photoshop to make the actual elements, and then you can animate the elements. You can import a Photoshop file, a PSD file, into After Effects and edit the layers directly within After Effects, have them animate uniquely. But for now, you'll see we have this, comes up here, animates like that. On my own, I also have some smoke effects in the background and some particle effects that come across here as this animates on. So as this is coming across, there's particles coming from the edge and a bit of a fade out. It's all about what you want to do with After Effects. If people would like to see more in-depth tutorials on advanced effects with After Effects, let me know in the comments and I can try and accommodate when time is available. So for now, what we'll do is we'll have this, and then we want that to be on for, say, 3 seconds, we'll say 4 seconds, and then we want it to go small. So if I now select all of these, pre-compose, and I'll just call it pop-up comp and move all attributes to the new composition. And we're still at 4 seconds. What I want to do is go to scale, set the scale for the entire element. So inside your comp 1, which is the composition that I'm working on, my main comp, I will just rename that to main. So that's my main composition. I have a pre-composition called pop-up comp, which has the logo, which is animated, the shape, which is animated on, and the text, which is animated on with the logo. Within here, we have just essentially a container for it, the pop-up comp. And between there and there, I'm going to make that drop to 0. So now if I play this through, we get this. We get that pop-up, it stays up for a while, and then it shrinks away. So really simple, really basic. It's all down to what you want to do with Adobe After Effects, with Photoshop, with Sony Vegas, with whatever tool you're looking to use. Try to make something that fits your style, the way you're looking for your media to be presented. There's some very simple designs that look just as good as some of the really complicated ones. You do what you want. Once you are at this point, it is time to now get this rendered out. So we're going to click to our render queue down here and click to our project up here and just drag that main composition down into the render queue. We can leave the render settings as best settings as we do on best quality. And for output module, we want to change this to QuickTime, as Apple QuickTime renders an MOV format which does support alpha. Audio output off for me, however, you could leave it on auto or on. With mine, I've also added audio as part of this composition, as WebM also supports audio, but it's all down to what you're looking at. Nothing wrong with a silent overlay or even adding your sound using your bot. Some of my effects are adding my bot, some are actually part of the video clips. So the last thing to change is changing channel from RGB to RGB plus alpha. Click OK, and then we go to render. So in here, I'm just going to go to tutorials. I'm going to put this in this folder, and I'm going to call it apparently my T key doesn't work, tutorial.mov. And then we will click render. And just wait for that to run through. It is usually a very quick render if you are using smaller time frames, because this is only a few seconds. And we'll pop up here into this folder. And inside here, we now have tutorial.mov, which is a 45 megabit file and looks a little bit something like this. Now that you've got your pre-rendered MOV format or other format video file that has transparency available to you, you want to look at converting this to a WebM format. The reason for this is the size of WebM graphics compared to the size of MOV graphics, etc., are absolutely tiny. If I just go through here to my overlays and look at MOV for the clip I showed earlier, that's 113 meg as an MOV file. As a WebM file, that same file is 1.39 meg. That's pretty much 100 times reduction, give or take a little bit there. So The file size is tiny while retaining quality. So to convert your file, you can do this in one of two ways. There's using Adobe Media Encoder, or there is also using ffmpeg. So we'll start with Adobe Media Encoder, then we'll move on to ffmpeg. The first thing you will need along with the Media Encoder is this WebM plugin for Premiere and also Media Encoder. This is from fnordware.com/webm. And you want to go to this website, it will be linked in the description, and click download Win or download Mac. It's just a DMG or an MSI installer file. Once that's installed, go into Media Encoder and you'll be able to render out as WebM. Click the little plus up here to add a new item. I will add my tutorial MOV. I will click here and it's defaulted to WebM as I have a template set up for this, but from the drop down here, make sure you choose WebM. Choose export video to make sure your video does render, export audio to render any audio that you've done. I'm going to uncheck that as there's no audio in my clip. My template settings are 1920 by 1080 as these are also the same as the file. If you're rendering at a different size or working in a different resolution, make sure that always matches up and 30 frames a second to match the composition we made. Your codec settings are all up to you. It's all about the quality you want. For this, I will put this one up to 50. You can do whatever you like with that. It'll still be a smaller file size than using the original MOV. And the most important thing to check is include alpha channel. This is what gives us our transparency. WebM handles transparency different to the way MOV does. You'll see that if you play certain WebM graphics within VLC, you'll see weird shading, which is actually transparency, but it's the way that VLC may display it. So once that's all done, click OK down here and set an output file, which will be tutorial.webm for me. And we'll click the little play button and you'll see just down here, that's going to render out. So I'll be back in a moment once that's rendered out and we'll see what file size that is. Okay, so as you'll see, it says done over here, and we've got a little green check mark, which shows that the render was successful. So we'll just go down here and have a look at the difference in the file sizes that we have. So the original file is a 45 megabit MOV file with transparency, and the new WebM file is 350 kilobytes. That is absolutely tiny, and as you'll see, still retains all quality, works beautifully, and will load in well, not even seconds when it comes to rendering. So that is how to convert to WebM using Adobe Media Encoder. Let's move on to ffmpeg and we'll see how to do the exact same thing for free. Now, for the free option of converting your file from MOV or other format to WebM is to use a piece of software called ffmpeg, which is available for, as far as I'm aware, Mac, Linux, Windows, and probably a few others in there as well. It's a very, very flexible piece of software. It is command line based, but it is very simple to understand once you know the few switches that are required. So you want to go to the website here, which is ffmpeg.org, and click the download button. That will take you to this page here where you can get it from Git or you can get the packages as required. Once you have this, you'll want to save this somewhere. I've saved this into my downloads folder on my computer. So the first thing I want to do is open up a command prompt. That's just CMD in your start menu. Once you're in there, you want to go CD, which is change directory. So you want to move to another location on your computer. I want to move to downloads ffmpeg. If you press tab after typing something, it will auto complete if it can. And I want to go backslash and I want to go in bin because that's where my ffmpeg.exe now lives. So if I do dir, which lists what is in the current directory, if you are on Linux or OS X, the command there would be ls to list the directory, but cd is still the same to move around your machine. And we'll see a few things in here now. What we want to do is we want to use this ffmpeg.exe here to be able to convert the previous file. So to do that, I want to just click here. I want to go ffmpeg.exe so that we're calling that application. We want to do -i, and this is your input file. The input file in this case will be my tutorial.mov. Now I've already copied to clipboard my path, so if I right click, that'll paste there, and that is the tutorial we rendered out earlier. If you don't have that copied, you can type that in and autocomplete until you get to where you need to go. Following that, we want to set the codec, which is -c:\v space lib vpx -vp9. This is the WebM codec that we're going to use to render. We want to do -crf, which is the quality setting, and I found 35 is a great quality setting for something, especially if it's 1080p overlay such as this. -b:\v0. If you're setting the CRF value within ffmpeg, you must set -bv0 for the variable bitrate to 0 when using constrained. The reason that I use this type of quality is it gives tiny file sizes whilst also keeping very high quality. Once we've done that, we want to say where we want it to save. So I'm going to cheat a bit. I'm going to paste the same thing here again, and I'm just going to call it ffmpeg.webm, and it's still in the same location. So just to go over that, we have the ffmpeg.exe, which is in the folder we are currently in. The input file for that is the D stream mixer tutorials, edits, etc. tutorial.mov. The codec we're using is libvpx vp9 with a quality setting of 35, and we're outputting that to make this file. With ffmpeg, you don't need as many switches in there, but I find adding some of these in, the quality related ones at least, adding those in help greatly when it comes to making sure you're matching a file size or things like that. So I'm just going to delete my extra space and press enter, and ffmpeg's just going to go away and do all of its thing here to convert that. So we'll be back in a moment once that's finished converting. So now we see that ffmpeg has finished rendering out that video. We can see some relevant stats here. It's the Apple Video Media Handler. It's using the codec we suggested. It's all set as it should. So let's actually have a look at the file it has created, and we'll see here it's 401 kilobytes, so it's slightly over what After Effects made. Maybe slightly more quality in there given the settings, but as you'll see, it does exactly the same as the other one did. It's just a really simple way to convert the files into something that loads very, very quickly within your live streaming or media editing software. So that was an overview on creating, editing, and converting transparent WebM graphics for online media for live streams and online video, using both free and paid for software, of which all will be linked below in the description, as well as the ffmpeg command that was used for easy reference, and the ffmpeg libvpx documentation should you want to look further into quality settings for using that. Please do reach out to me on Twitter at darkfiretech if you do have any questions or any suggestions for tutorials, improvements, anything you'd like to know, or reach out to me. Check out my stream only on Mixer at Darkfire TV, and of course check out the rest of the Mushroom Madness. Brilliant Mixer team, lots of great things going on right now. I will leave you with a little clip of the 3 variations that were rendered out, the MOV and the 2 WebMs, just to show you the differences in quality.